the Active Liberal League. So I thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to make this. As Stacy said, I am presenting on Article 10, the proposed amendment to Article 10, which addresses the citizenship of the foreign spouse married to, in the Constitution as it is now, to the Bahamian. And so I wanted to just set out that before I started. For the listening audience, for those of you who know this already, just bear with me. But we are a constitutional democracy. And while we bandy about the word constitution, I don't know that many of us appreciate the function of the Constitution, how it operates, and where it plays a part in our lives. So if we start at the beginning, when we got our independence, that's when we got our Constitution. The Constitution, though, is so fundamentally it's not even the word important, it's just so fundamental to the existence of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And when I say that, what I mean is the Constitution itself is what created the Bahamas. It's what makes us a sovereign nation. And in addition to that, making us a sovereign nation, the Constitution also makes itself the supreme law of this land. So it is that law that is higher than all law document. But what does it contain? It's divided into chapters, and there are 10 chapters. One chapter gets into, okay, who are the people who are of this nation? That's citizenship. The third chapter deals with and addresses fundamental rights and the protection of those fundamental rights and freedoms. There are the powers and duties of the Governor General. Following that is Section 5, which deals with Parliament. So it sets out the Houses of Parliament, again, function, powers, duties. Likewise, the executive is dealt with in Chapter 6, and Chapter 7 is the judicature section, which deals with the establishment of the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, the Privy Council. Chapter 8 deals with public service. Chapter 9 deals with finance. That's where the Consolidated Fund is established. And the last chapter is Chapter 10, interpretation. So it is that chapter that defines certain terms in the Constitution. So if you were to pick up this document, it's set out in a very logical format. And it essentially sets up what the country, that we are a sovereign nation, what is a citizen, these are the rights and freedoms of those citizens, and what are our institutions. That's what the Constitution does. Now, the Constitution was drafted years leading up to independence, but it's been July 10th, 1973. We are now 43 years later. And constitutional scholars would say that the Constitution really is made. It has to always be relevant and meet the needs of the people. As I am fond of saying to my legal colleagues, law serves the people. It's not the other way around. And then has to be reflective of people always in the present. So it has to move with its society. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that you change the Constitution lightly, but if we were to look at other countries that have constitution, and all Western democracies have constitution, right? Constitution's the only one, to my knowledge, and I can be corrected, is England does not have a written constitution. But it's a quirky little country that's been around for 1,000 years, and they have their own institutions though. But it's really newer democracies. But if we look at our closest neighbor to the the United States has amended its constitution 27 times. There have been even more proposed amendments. So for instance, when they speak of that right to bear, that was their second amendment. It wasn't in the original constitution, they amended it. The right to freedom of speech, that's an amendment. And civil rights, it's all been amended. And many seem to address the indigenous people. They have taken the steps needed as set out in their particular constitutions to make those amendments. Now, how does this bring us to these proposed amendments? Well, the most recent proposed, set up a constitutional commission and he gave them a task, a mandate, to see and to investigate, to study what are those areas in our Constitution that it may be time for us to amend. And it went and traveled the length and breadth of this country. It had town hall meetings. They invited people to make recommendations, and people from all walks of life. And they produced a report, the Constitution Commission report, which I think is almost 250 pages long, but it's worth reading. And they submitted that to Parliament. Now, in that report, there are any number of suggested amendments. But according to the Commission's, the issue of citizenship was paramount in Bahamians' minds, second only to the death penalty. So when questions are raised, well, why this issue? Why now? Because when they went out and they did their research and they interacted and interfaced with the Bahamian people, that was the response that they got. Now, all of the issues raised by the public are not being addressed by these proposed amendments for any number of reasons, some of which the Constitution may not be the place to address some of those issues, but certainly citizenship. And so when one looks to the constitutional provisions that deal with citizenship, then we look at, well, okay, what is it that has to be amended? If we look at Chapter 2, the citizenship, they go from Section 3 to Section 14 in the citizenship provisions. The earlier provisions, 3, 4, and 5, and I think 6, they really address persons who were already here before we became independent. My task tonight is to look at Article 10. Article 10 is actually a very short article, and it deals with foreign spouses of Bahamian men. And so what does it say? Any person who after 9th July 1973 marries or becomes a citizen of the Bahamas shall be entitled, provided she is still so married, upon making application in such manner as may be prescribed, and upon taking the oath of allegiance or such declaration as may be prescribed, to be registered as a citizen of the Bahamas. So what this says is, a foreign woman marries a Bahamian man after independence, she can apply to become a citizen, and upon making her application in the prescribed manner, which is set out in other legislation, she can take the oath of allegiance and be registered as a Bahamian citizen. Now, there's another little paragraph here. To be registered as a citizen of the Bahamas under this article shall be subject to such exceptions or qualifications as may be prescribed national security or public policy. So her ability to be registered as a Bahamian citizen would be subject to national security or public policy. So in addressing now what amendments to our Constitution in relation to citizenship ought we to amend at this time, this is one of the articles. And why? Because this really only gives a right to a Bahamian male. It does not give a similar right to a foreign spouse to a Bahamian woman. And so the proposed amendment is where it says any woman, that should read any man or woman that marries a person, that person would be allowed to apply again in the prescribed manner, and that they would be registered as a Bahamian citizen. Now, there are qualifiers to that. And so another proposed section to this Article 10 is a Section 2. So Article 10 then would have a Section 1 and a Section 2. And Section 2 actually sets out conditions under which this application would be made and considered. So for instance, the person would be denied registration if, upon the satisfactory evidence being presented, that the marriage no longer subsists. So if you're not married to the person anymore, you cannot apply for citizenship. If the marriage is entered into for the purpose of just enabling the person to get Bahamian citizenship, people don't live together. So these two provisions address the concern of these marriages of convenience where people may want to marry just to gain Bahamian citizenship. They have put these precautionary measures in here. And then finally, again, the issue of public policy and national security. Every single issue, it would not be appropriate to address in the Constitution, but we could amend the Nationality Act, which is that The Bahamian man who marries a foreign woman, his wife may apply for citizenship, that now the Bahamian woman or the Bahamian man, their spouses could apply for citizenship. Okay? And that's really it in a nutshell. And this really has to do with the right of a Bahamian citizen to pass on, not to pass on, but for their spouse to apply for citizenship by virtue of being married to a Bahamian citizen. We have given that right to the Bahamian man, but in 1973, when we got our constitution, that right was not given to the Bahamian woman. And what we're saying now is that it is time for us to eradicate these inequalities under the Constitution, and all Bahamian citizens should have an equal right in terms of this provision here. Because really, what the consideration is that the way I look at it certainly is, if John's wife, foreign wife, can gain access to citizenship through marrying him, and Jane's foreign husband cannot gain access through marrying her, are we saying that Jane's Bahamian citizenship is somehow different than John's citizenship? Is the citizenship of the Bahamian woman a different category of citizenship? Now, that's not what it's saying in the Constitution necessarily, but is that a logical inference that somehow the citizenship of a Bahamian woman is of a lesser degree? And if that's what it's saying, is that what we want to say? So from my perspective, certainly, I think that's something for Bahamians to really, that's the question you have to ask yourself. Is this what we're trying to say? Is citizenship not a thing that once one has it, that each person's citizenship should be equal in its integrity and authenticity to anyone else's citizenship? And if somehow by virtue of citizenship, I cannot confer something to someone and someone else can, I think the logical inference is that it's not. And is that right? Is that fair? Is that equitable? And so that is the wrong or the inequality that this proposed amendment is trying to balance and eradicate.
Love the talk show. And I hear a lot of people, they're speaking as though once the person, like, their fear is that all of a sudden women are going to marry a lot and then come and take all of their jobs. This seems to be what all the fearmongers.
I think, like, perhaps some ideas, it may have a mixture of false and true. And there's a process in place that she has to follow. There is a time period that has to pass, and these applications usually they are considered for quite a period of time. From my own knowledge, these applications can take several years, 10, 15 years. But I also that an issue that people have to be mindful of is that a Bahamian woman should be no less entitled to make her life in this country, notwithstanding that she chooses to spend her life with a foreign man.
I feel like it's been said often, can't they apply now? Why do we need to enshrine this?
Subsidiary legislation, the Nationality Act, the Immigration Act. The Constitution as it stands now gives this right to the Bahamian man. And so when you're trying, it's sort of like looking for a red herring. Yes, you can, there is this, but when you apply for something, inherent in that, in any application is yes or no. And so there is that aspect. You could always be refused. In the interim, while you're applying, you have to get, you have to pay for work permit. So there is a burden placed on that family that is not, and on that citizen of the Bahamas, that woman, that is not placed on the Bahamian man. So it's really a question, at the end of the day, this is really a question of fairness. And so Constitution as it is now, there is this right to the Bahamian man, and we just don't have it in there for the woman. Now, I will say that I have heard suggestions that it shouldn't be there for the man either. Maybe we should take it out, and no one has it. But we are a democracy, and democracies function a certain way. And we don't take those rights away. And so if one segment of society has a right, the right thing to do is to ensure that everyone has that right. You wouldn't take it from the citizenry. So we have to keep in mind that we are a democracy, and democracies function a certain way.
It's about equality, it's about citizenship, and I guess in what you said there, that makes it clear that it is about more about equality than it is about citizenship.
Well, I don't think it has to be about either or. It would be about both. The Constitution allows men, married men, to transfer their citizenship to their children. And so it's the way citizenship is transferred. There are countries that transfer citizenship by virtue of if you're born in the country, that's it. That's not how citizenship works in the Bahamas. It's transferred from a person to another person. And so we have to ensure that that power is that's bestowed upon all Bahamians, not just to a segment of the population. So it's both, it's fundamentally, I would say, equality, but in relation to the particular issue of citizenship.
Also, like what you talked about in terms of who has the right to pursue that citizenship entitlements in this country. Yeah, but that is the people and what we want. The recorded webinar will be available on Active Liberal League's Facebook page if you want to listen to it again. But once again, thank you, Janet.